May what I speak, may what you hear be in the name of the God of love, who creates, redeems, sustains every single one of us. Amen. Please be seated. Well, first things first, let me say it again. Merry Christmas, everybody. It's really wonderful to see you all here this evening. Christmas is wonderful, don't you think? Most people, I think, love Christmas, including me, by the way. But I think we also need to recognize that Christmas can come with its challenges, you know? What do I mean by that? Well, a few years ago, a survey about Christmas was done here in the UK. 2,000 people were surveyed, and it found some rather interesting results. In particular, the survey found that the typical group of family or friends gathered together at this time of year, that group has an average of 5 rows. 5 big arguments on Christmas Day. I'm telling you tonight so that you're forewarned for tomorrow. The first row in the family, the researchers tell us, happens at 10:13 a.m. Watch out for it. And it's over who is preparing what for the day ahead. Who's cooking the dinner? Who's setting the table? Who's not doing very much at all? Row number 2 happens at 12:42. This apparently is when many of us have a good old moan about the presents we received not really being the presents we wanted to receive. Row number 3 happens between 1 and 3 p.m. So kind of a broad time frame there. In other words, it happens when we sit down to eat. And it's often, they say, a row over the turkey being too dry or the Brussels sprouts being overcooked. Brussels sprouts can be overcooked. Row number 4, according to the survey, happens at 6:05 p.m. precisely. Don't ask me how they know. And this one is a fight over the TV remote control. Sound familiar? And the final row number 5, will happen at 10:15 p.m. tomorrow evening, once all the wine has been drunk and the last mince pie has been eaten. Tempers, we're told, will flare just before bedtime. Happy Christmas, indeed. Well, it's a bit of a silly survey, isn't it? I suppose. And not everyone, of course, has family and friends around to row with. And we must remember that too. But nevertheless, the survey is a good reminder to us that beyond all the tinsel and the lights and all the rest, Christmas is about real people. People like you and me, living real lives with all the ups and downs that goes along with that. And it's also a reminder, I think, to those of us who talk about Christmas for a living. That's a good definition of a vicar, someone who talks about Christmas for a living. It's a reminder to us that whatever we say about Christmas has to relate to that kind of reality, that kind of lived, rather messy, less than perfect, joyful yet complicated reality of our lives. And I suppose the one thing I really want to say to you this evening is this. Despite the impression you may have been given by 1 million cutesy Christmas cards and 1 million sanitized versions of the Christmas story, The truth is that when you look at the accounts of the birth of Jesus in the Bible, you find, well, what do you find? Most definitely not an Instagram perfect fairy tale, that's for sure. No, you find a gritty, rather messy, true-to-life story of things not going to plan, of things being not quite what we would want them to be, and yet hope, and yet love, and yet meaning, and yet purpose, and yet God found right there in the mess. After all, just think again about the details of the Christmas stories in the Bible. We heard Luke's account a minute ago. Christmas is the story of a heavily, heavily pregnant young woman forced by the powers that be to make a long journey far from home just as she's about to give birth. Christmas is the story of that birth happening not in the high-tech world of a 21st century hospital, not even indoors really. There was no room at the inn, but a birth happening amidst the muck and the dirt and the stink of a stable. And if you read on further in the Bible, you'll find that the story gets even more real, even more gritty, because Christmas, we discover, is also the story of this little family, Mary, Joseph, and the Christ child, being forced to flee as refugees into Egypt because the local tyrant, King Herod, wants to kill the baby. And read on even more in the Bible, spoiler alert, and you find that when the baby grows up, when that little baby grows up, he is cut down in his prime, crucified, put to death on a cross, killed by a deadly combination of corrupt and cowardly religious leaders and corrupt and cowardly political leaders. And even when, as Christians believe, Jesus rose from the dead at Easter, he still has the scars. He still has the wounds made by the nails of that cross on his hands and on his feet. It's a long, long way from Christmas as nostalgic, feel-good, airbrushed fairy tale. But you know, perhaps that's what we need, maybe now more than ever. We need a reminder that our deepest, deepest joy is to be found not in escaping from reality, but in engaging fully, honestly, wholeheartedly with reality. We need a reminder that God, that beautiful little word, God, as some abstract philosophical principle up there or out there somewhere. That's all well and good. But what we really need is a God here with us. A God like Jesus who knows from the inside what it's like to be human, what it's like to live and to laugh and to cry and to die. We need a reminder that faith, true faith, faith worth believing, is not superstition. Believing in God won't make all your problems magically disappear, but it might give you the courage to face them and the assurance that we're never ultimately on our own when we do. In short, the message of Christmas is simply this. No matter how messed up things get, no matter how pushed around we may feel by life or by the forces that control our lives, no matter what mucky, stinky stable we find ourselves in, so to speak, no matter what cross we might have to bear, no matter how dark the road ahead may look, we can trust that there's always hope. We can trust that God is with us and is staying put with us. We can trust that darkness won't have the final word. So enjoy the celebrations, and if you're spending time with others tomorrow, watch out for the 5 rows, and have a happy and Merry Christmas.